The old blacksmith had buried his wife, buried his daughter, and buried every reason he had left to keep living. For 6 silent years, no child had crossed the threshold of his forge. Then, on the coldest evening of October 1892, someone knocked. Not loudly. Not desperately. Just 3 slow taps. When the old man opened the door, he didn't see what stopped his heart. He heard it. A thin voice belonging to a blind 9-year-old boy standing barefoot in the rain, holding the tiny hand of a little girl no older than 4. The boy lifted his face toward a man he had never seen and quietly asked, "My father said good people repair broken things. Can you repair our future too?" The blacksmith's hammer slipped from his hand and crashed onto the stone floor. Because those weren't ordinary words. They were the exact words his own father had spoken to him nearly 40 years earlier. For the first time since losing his family, the old man cried. And neither child understood why. If this story touches your heart, stay with me until the end. Because what happened after that rainy night would become one of the most unforgettable stories the people of Red Creek ever told. The town of Red Creek sat between endless forests and rough mountains in the Wyoming Territory. It was a place where winter arrived early and mercy arrived late. People survived because they worked. Farmers worked the frozen fields. Miners disappeared into the mountains before sunrise. Hunters followed tracks through waist-deep snow. And whenever iron broke, everyone came to one man. Elias Morgan, the oldest blacksmith for nearly 100 miles. His forge stood alone at the edge of town beside a narrow river that never completely froze. Every morning before daylight, smoke climbed from his chimney. Every evening after sunset, the steady ringing of his hammer echoed across the valley. People respected him. Some feared him. None truly knew him anymore. They remembered the younger Elias. The smiling husband. The proud father. The man who laughed louder than anyone during harvest festivals. But that man disappeared 6 years earlier. It happened in a single afternoon. His wife, Eleanor, and their 8-year-old daughter, Rose, were returning from town when the wooden bridge over Pine Creek collapsed beneath their wagon. By the time neighbors reached the river, it was already too late. The current carried away everything Elias loved. The funeral lasted less than an hour. His grief never ended. Afterward he removed every family picture from the walls. He closed every upstairs room except one. He stopped attending church. Stopped celebrating Christmas. Stopped accepting dinner invitations. Eventually, people stopped asking. Children were warned not to bother the lonely blacksmith. "He likes being alone," parents whispered. But they were wrong. No one truly likes loneliness. Some people simply become too exhausted to fight it. Every evening Elias repeated the same routine. Feed the horse. Lock the workshop. Sweep the floor. Eat bread and soup. Sit beside the fireplace. Stare into the flames until sleep arrived. The silence had become so familiar that even the ticking clock sounded loud. He had convinced himself this would be the rest of his life. Quiet. Predictable. Empty. Until that rain-filled evening. A cold wind pushed against the forge door while Elias stacked fresh coal beside the furnace. The storm had arrived unexpectedly. Rain mixed with sleet hammered the roof. Branches scraped against the windows like restless fingers. His old shepherd dog, Duke, suddenly lifted his head. Then growled. Not the angry growl reserved for wolves. A warning. Someone was outside. Elias frowned. Nobody traveled after sunset in weather like this. He reached for the lantern. Opened the heavy oak door. The wind blew icy rain into the workshop. At first, he saw nothing. Only darkness. Then lightning flashed across the valley. 2 tiny figures stood at the end of the path. The older child wore an oversized brown coat patched so many times that almost none of the original fabric remained. His trousers were soaked. His boots had split open. Water dripped from his dark hair. One hand gripped a crooked walking stick. The other held the tiny fingers of a little girl wrapped inside a faded blue blanket. She leaned against him, trembling. Neither child moved. The boy turned his face slightly. His eyes were pale, clouded. He wasn't looking at Elias. He couldn't. The boy was blind. Yet somehow, he smiled politely. "Sir." His voice barely rose above the rain. "Are you Mr. Morgan?" Elias didn't answer immediately. "I am." The boy nodded as if he had expected that answer. "My name is Samuel Carter." He gently squeezed the little girl's hand. "This is my sister Lily." The girl coughed. A weak, painful cough. Samuel swallowed before speaking again. We're sorry to disturb you. Another cough escaped Lily's lips. We only need one night. We can sleep in your barn. We'll leave before sunrise. Elias stared. Not because children had arrived, but because of how they stood. Samuel positioned himself between the storm and his little sister. Every gust of freezing wind struck him first. Every drop of rain soaked him first. Even though he couldn't see where she was. He knew. By instinct. By love. The little girl suddenly shivered so hard she nearly collapsed. Samuel caught her instantly. Easy, Lily. I'm here. Elias noticed something else. The boy's hands. Cut. Bleeding. As if he had been using them to feel every rock, every tree, every road for miles. How long have you been walking? Samuel hesitated. I'm not sure. We stopped counting after the second sunrise. Elias felt something tighten inside his chest. 3 days. Maybe longer. Without shelter. Without certainty. Without anyone willing to stop. He looked down. The children carried only one small cloth bag. Nothing else. No wagon. No horse. No parents. No future. Where are your mother and father? The question hung between them. Samuel lowered his head. For several seconds. Only the rain answered. Finally he whispered, They're gone. Not crying. Not shaking. Simply stating a fact he had already repeated too many times. Lily doesn't know everything. So please, don't ask in front of her. The little girl looked up. When are we going home, Sammy? Samuel smiled. The kind of smile that existed only to protect someone else. Soon. I promise. Elias had seen soldiers wear that exact expression before marching into impossible battles. A smile built entirely from courage. Not hope. The old blacksmith stepped aside. You'll freeze out there. Samuel immediately shook his head. No, sir. The barn is enough. You don't know us. Elias looked into the rain behind them. Then back at the children. No child sleeps in my barn. Come inside. Samuel didn't move. Sir. We don't have money. I wasn't asking for any. We can't work tonight. I didn't ask for work. We may stay longer than one night. Elias sighed. Then quietly replied. I didn't ask how long. Something inside Samuel finally broke. Not loudly. Not dramatically. His shoulders simply relaxed. As though he had been carrying the weight of the entire world. And someone had finally offered to hold a tiny piece of it. He guided Lily carefully across the doorway. The warmth of the forge wrapped around them instantly. Lily smiled. It's warm. Samuel laughed softly. I can hear the fire. The old blacksmith froze. I know that sound. Samuel tilted his head toward the furnace. My father was a carpenter. He always said every workshop sings. This one sounds happy. Elias looked around his silent forge. Happy? He hadn't thought that word belonged here anymore. While Lily warmed her tiny hands near the fire, Elias prepared hot soup. Samuel listened carefully to every movement. The scrape of the bowl. The crackling wood. The kettle beginning to whistle. You stir with your left hand? Samuel suddenly said. Elias blinked. What? And your right knee hurts. The blacksmith stared. How do you know that? You walk heavier on the right side. My father limped after cutting timber. You sound the same. Elias couldn't remember the last time anyone had observed him so carefully. Not with their eyes, but with their heart. When the soup was ready, Lily ate like a child who hadn't seen food in days. Samuel waited. You first, he whispered. Only after Lily finished did he accept his own bowl. Even then, he secretly pushed half his bread toward her. He thought nobody noticed. Elias noticed. Every single piece. Later that night, after Lily had fallen asleep beside the warm fireplace wrapped in an old wool blanket, Elias finally asked the question he had avoided all evening. Samuel? What happened? The boy sat silently. His fingers rested on the worn wooden walking stick. Outside, the wind howled across the valley. Inside, only the fire moved. After a long silence, Samuel spoke. My father refused to sell our land. He said some things are worth more than money. They came 3 nights later. They weren't robbers. They knew exactly what they wanted. Samuel's voice became quieter. They searched the whole house. They kept asking where father hid the papers. They never found them. Elias leaned forward. What papers? Samuel slowly turned his blind eyes toward the warmth of the fire. My father called them. The proof. Another long silence filled the room. Then Samuel whispered the words that made every hair on Elias Morgan's neck stand up. They killed him anyway. And before he died, he told me to take Lily, find the old blacksmith by the river, and never let anyone know where the proof is. The fire popped sharply. Outside, somewhere beyond the storm, a horse neighed in the darkness. Elias stood slowly. His instincts, buried for years, suddenly awakened. Someone else knew these children were alive. And deep inside, he realized this peaceful night was already over. The sound of the horse came again. Closer, slow, patient, like someone who already knew exactly where they were going. Elias quietly extinguished the lantern near the front window. The forge instantly became darker. Only the orange glow of the furnace remained. Samuel tilted his head. There are 2 horses. Elias looked at him. You can hear that? Samuel nodded. One horse is old. The other is younger. The younger one keeps striking the ground. It's nervous. The blacksmith stepped toward the window. The blind boy was right. 2 riders stopped outside his gate. Neither man dismounted. They simply stared toward the forge. After nearly a minute, they turned their horses around and disappeared into the darkness. Elias remained perfectly still. He had spent years reading Dangerous Men. Those weren't travelers. They were confirming something. Someone had followed the children. Morning arrived under a gray sky. Rain had stopped, but the cold remained. Lily finally woke smiling for the first time in days. She wrapped both arms around the warm bowl of oatmeal Elias prepared. This is the best breakfast ever. Samuel smiled after hearing her laugh. It was the first genuine smile Elias had heard from the boy. For a brief moment, the old forge almost felt alive again. Then hoofbeats echoed through the valley. This time, many more. Elias looked through the window. 6 riders. At their center rode a tall man dressed in an expensive black coat. His horse alone cost more than most farms in Red Creek. He didn't look like a cowboy. He looked like someone accustomed to giving orders. The riders stopped outside the gate. The man removed his gloves with slow confidence. My name is Charles Whitmore. I believe 2 children wandered onto your property. Elias opened the workshop door but remained standing in the entrance. They're not wandering anymore. Whitmore smiled. A generous answer. I've come to take them home. Samuel quietly whispered from behind Elias. That's him. The man who spoke to father. Elias didn't turn around. Stay inside. Whitmore stepped closer. I assume they've told you a very emotional story. They're frightened. They misunderstand what happened. My associates were only trying to protect valuable property. Elias folded his arms. Children don't walk 3 days through the mountains because they misunderstood something. Whitmore's smile faded. I own nearly half this valley. I settle problems peacefully. I'd rather not create another. The old blacksmith answered calmly. Then leave. For several seconds, neither man spoke. Finally Whitmore reached into his coat. He unfolded several official-looking papers. I legally purchased the Carter land. The children belong in county custody until relatives are located. Elias never even looked at the documents. Then bring the sheriff. Whitmore's eyes narrowed. I was hoping you'd be reasonable. I was hoping you'd be honest. Silence settled between them. Whitmore slowly folded the papers again. As he mounted his horse, he quietly said, You've chosen strangers over your own peace. Elias answered without hesitation. I chose children. Whitmore stared for another long moment. Then his riders turned around. As they disappeared over the hill, Samuel whispered, He'll come back. Elias nodded. I know. After they left, Samuel reached into the inside pocket of his torn coat. He carefully removed something wrapped inside cloth. It was an old brass key. Small, heavy, worn smooth with age. My father gave me this. He said if anything happened, give it only to the blacksmith. Elias accepted the key carefully. What does it open? Samuel shook his head. I don't know. He never told me. He only said, The answer is hidden where fire sleeps. The old blacksmith repeated the words quietly. Where fire sleeps. His eyes slowly moved across the workshop. The furnace. The coal bins. The tool racks. Then, his gaze stopped. Against the far wall stood an ancient iron safe built directly into the brick chimney. It had belonged to Elias's own father. Nobody had opened it in almost 15 years. Elias walked toward it. His hands trembled slightly. The brass key fit perfectly. With a loud metallic click, the old lock finally opened. Inside lay only 3 objects. A faded leather journal, a sealed envelope, and a small iron box. Samuel quietly stood. I think that's it. Elias carefully lifted the box. It was surprisingly heavy. Inside were dozens of folded documents. Land deeds, property maps, signed contracts, receipts, and beneath everything, a handwritten notebook. Every illegal purchase, every forged signature, every threatened family, every missing landowner. Whitmore hadn't simply stolen one farm. He had stolen nearly an entire valley. Elias slowly closed the lid. This is enough to destroy him. Samuel quietly asked, will father finally get justice? The old blacksmith looked at the boy. Yes. But only if we survive long enough to deliver this. That afternoon, snow began falling. Earlier than anyone expected. Large heavy flakes covered the valley. Visibility dropped quickly. Then Duke, the old shepherd dog, barked furiously. Elias rushed outside. Fresh horse tracks. Surrounding the property. Not passing. Circling. Whitmore's men were watching. Waiting. The blacksmith immediately barred every door. Covered the windows. Loaded the old rifle that had not fired a single shot since Eleanor's funeral. Lily noticed. Are bad people coming? Elias knelt beside her. Maybe. Will they hurt us? No. His answer came instantly. Not because he knew. Because he had decided. Night fell. No moon. No stars. Only snow. The forge remained silent. No fire. No lights. Everyone waited. Around midnight, the first voice echoed outside. Mr. Morgan. Charles Whitmore. I'll give you one last chance. Hand over the children. No one gets hurt. Elias answered through the closed door. Leave. Whitmore sighed. I truly hoped you would. Seconds later, glass exploded. A burning torch crashed through the front window. Then another. Then another. The workshop floor burst into flames. Lily screamed. Samuel immediately crawled toward her voice. Stay behind me. Even though he couldn't see the fire, he knew exactly where his sister was. Elias threw buckets of sand across the burning floor. Smoke filled the room. Outside, Whitmore shouted, Bring me the box. The blacksmith froze. He had never mentioned any box. Whitmore knew. Someone had betrayed them. The back door suddenly burst open. 2 armed men rushed inside. Elias swung his heavy blacksmith hammer with all the strength left in his aging body. The first attacker collapsed instantly. The second stumbled backward. Samuel grabbed a long iron poker from beside the furnace. Completely blind, he listened. Footsteps. Breathing. Movement. The moment the attacker charged, Samuel struck low. The man screamed as the poker slammed into his shin. He fell. Elias finished the fight. Within seconds, both intruders were unconscious. The old blacksmith stared at Samuel. You couldn't even see him. Samuel lowered the poker. I heard him. Outside. Whitmore realized his men had failed. His patience disappeared. Burn everything. More torches flew through the windows. The roof caught fire. Smoke thickened. Lily began coughing violently. Samuel reached for her hand. Elias. We have to leave. The old blacksmith looked toward the hidden tunnel beneath the workshop. His grandfather had built it during the mining wars decades earlier. Nobody else knew it existed. He lifted the heavy iron trapdoor beneath the anvil. Quick. Samuel carried Lily onto his back. Elias grabbed the iron box. Together, they disappeared underground. Seconds later, the roof collapsed. Whitmore watched flames consume the forge. He smiled. They're finished. But he was wrong. Nearly 200 yards away, 3 figures quietly emerged from the tunnel beside the frozen river. Samuel turned toward the burning forge. Even without sight, He felt the heat against his face. Our home is gone. Elias gently placed one hand on the boy's shoulder. No. He looked down at Samuel, then at little Lily, then at the iron box tucked safely beneath his arm. Home isn't a building. It's the people you refuse to abandon. Samuel smiled faintly. For the first time since his father died, someone else's words made him believe tomorrow still existed. Far behind them, the forge collapsed completely into flames. Far ahead, a distant whistle echoed through the snowy valley. The train. The morning train to the federal capital. If they reached it before Whitmore, justice still had a chance. But hidden somewhere among the pine trees, a rifle barrel slowly followed their every step. Someone had survived the fire, and someone was hunting them.